that the live stream has started?
I can confirm, Mr. Chairman, the live stream has started.
Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Herefordshire Council Audit and Governance Committee being held on Monday the 30th of January 2023. Those present in the meeting room, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest exit and make your way to the fire assembly point in the car park. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and is making a recording. To ensure that recording quality is maintained, please speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum. Please ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Others are permitted to film, photograph and record public meetings provided it does not interrupt the business of the meeting. If there are any members of the public present who do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please raise your hand now so each person filming or photography may be made aware. Present. Only committee members present in the meeting room may vote. A number of people in attendance as virtual participants, can I request that they use the raise hand function within the system if they wish to contribute and to introduce themselves when they are called upon. So, moving to the agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I believe we have apologies have been received from Councillor Ginman and Councillor Balderson. No other apologies, I think everyone else is present. Are there any named substitutes?
None have been notified, Chair.
No named substitutes. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare any interest in any agenda item? No?
Yep.
That's good. I propose to take agenda item 5 prior to minutes, as I intend to spend, I think the committee had indicated they wanted to spend some time on the action list. So I think it's prudent to take questions prior to that. So with the committee's indulgence, I'll take agenda item 5 now, questions from members of the public. Committee has received 2 questions from members of the public for this meeting, and a response to each has been published in the supplement to the agenda papers. Those members of the public who have submitted questions have the opportunity to submit a written supplementary question or to join the meeting to ask their supplementary question live. Supplementary questions are to be no more than 1 minute in length and must include a question. I'll now ask the clerk to confirm if a supplementary question is to be asked. Firstly, Hannah Curry.
Yes, Chair, a written question has been submitted, which I'll read out now. Families affected state data, the CYPD process is inaccurate, is after proceedings conclude this misleading documented information comes to light. One exemption being used is data is social work data, not that it belongs to third parties. Families know information has had detrimental effects on decisions being made that is the result of failing to upload /enter information by CYPD staff or the deletion of current information during data cleansing by admin staff. To support serious complaints about staff, SARs are being made and refused. As a result, Council needs to ask its representative if this isn't due to incompetent / poorly trained staff and is, as the staff would like to claim, the IT system, Mosaic, responsible. What steps have they taken to recover lost data, source a fit-for-purpose IT system in conjunction with those who would know what data is missing, i.e. the families?
Thank you. Thank you to Ms Curry for your question. I shall ensure that a written reply is provided within the 10 days. The question comes from Melissa Gorman-Lewis. Is there a supplementary?
Yes, Chair, there's a written supplementary for this one as well, which I'll read out for me. As per point 5.518 in your whistleblowing policy, it is not clear if you routinely report unlawful acts to the police, allowing external agencies to conduct further investigation when such serious conduct issues arise, issues such as fraud arise. In your Q3 audits report, it states this happened. It is understood you're not able to report a name or detailed evidence, but your answer remains cloudy at best and not in the spirit of transparency and openness. Therefore, the officer's rank should be clearly identified and the outcome from internal investigation shared in the public's best interest. Was the employee in question during a disciplinary process found guilty and dismissed with gross misconduct as a result?
Thank you, Mrs. Porton-Lewis. Your supplementary raises clearly important matters of public interest, but also matters which are are normally disclosed because we do not name individuals. In terms of our policy, we have reviewed most recently what's come forward through the whistleblowing policy. I'm pleased to see that the whistleblowing process is being used. I think the policy is therefore working. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. And I think our committee is anticipating a report to come forward at the March meeting suggesting ways in which it can be improved. In terms of the specifics of the questions you're asking, I'll ask for a written reply to you and just to see what more information we can provide without without the sort of disclosures which we're not allowed to make. And hopefully that will satisfy your inquiry. Thank you. No questions from councillors. Agenda item 6. And now we'll revert back to the minutes. Agenda item 4. Minutes of meeting held on 21st of November 2052 are included in the agenda, pages 11 to 16 for approval. No matters of accuracy have been notified to the monitoring officer. Are you content that I sign the minutes as an accurate record?
Yes.
Thank you, committee. Committee's action log is attached to the minutes, pages 17 to 20, with printed copies provided in the meeting room. Previously, members have indicated that they'd like to spend a few minutes going through the action log to see where we are on some of these actions and where we're going with them. How do you want me to run this? Do you want me to go page by page or action by action?
We seem to be kicking a few down the road again, Chairman.
Yeah. Let's try going quickly, action by action, and just see how time progresses. We've got the first action number 91, looking at the aggregation of similar risks in across directorates. The due date for that was October 22. Don't seem to have had any further updates on that, but I do recall. I recall a suggestion that looking at strategic risks is something that will be going to the management, to the corporate leadership team. Yeah. So could we go back to head of corporate performance, director of strategy, and just ask for a date, please, for that to be updated? So, yes.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I think certainly from one of the main reasons I'm concerned is that obviously from action 91 on down to 129, so that's about 7 or 8 actions. You know, these, the first meeting date was in 2021. So whilst we're going down action by action, I think for the first set of those that are dated 2021, making their first appearance, I think additionally, we want to understand how you could have practically a 2-year drift on the action plan.
Thank you. So, so I think unless we've got a progress update, which clearly provided, that's a very good point, Councillor Bartlett makes. For those actions that began in 2021, I think unless we have a clear indication from the owner as to when this will be completed and an explanation of how it will be completed by that date, that we invite them to the March meeting to discuss with us why the actions are remaining outstanding. Yes.
If I may, Chair, as well, just jumping ahead slightly to the corporate risk register item, in paragraph 5 of that on page 44, it does say that the Director of Strategy will bring a report to committee's meeting in March and set out principles and approach the Council has taken to managing corporate risk strategically. So I anticipate that may cover off some of the items that got outstanding in the register.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, in which case, can we make sure that the due date then in this action then correlates with what you just pointed out to us?
So if the risk owner agrees that can be 5th of March, then that's acceptable to us. Right. Just going through these. Action 94. Briefing last November, we had an overview process and requested diligence. Audit recommendations were being considered at meetings of director leadership teams. Something was due to come to this meeting on that, but we haven't had an update.
No, I think there's going to be just a quick overview for members. Perhaps we can arrange that with the next briefing for the next meeting, just to get a quick update on that to close that off.
Thank you. Action 99, corporate risk register. Again, this will be covered, I think, in the March meeting then.
Sorry, will it? I'm just asking, will it be covered in the March meeting?
Well, my understanding is that the Director of Strategy will be bringing something to the March meeting in terms of strategic risk.
Okay.
Which is what's really covered under that. Action 102, information of position within section 106 may be held. We have an update.
There's this was brought up in the last minutes, where it was commented that information on section 106 monies held by ward have been provided to councillors, but specific information on the value of funds spent had not yet been circulated. Therefore, the action was not complete. And I think that was the issue with it.
Right. So again, if we can go back to the owner and ask for the action to be completed.
Well, Chair, I can give an update if that helps on that one.
Yeah. So,
thank you, Chair. In terms of the section 106 money, the request is about the situations where we've received the money from the developer and it has timed out and we've not spent the money. There are a relatively small handful of those ones, and individual ward members, I understand, have been contacted about them, had those bespoke conversations. So we haven't sent a list out to everyone because of most ward members, there's nothing to report because there are no 106 monies that are unspent. But I think to close this item, it's probably best to be circulate a listing of the ones that are in that position, but they're timed out, so everybody can see that. Otherwise, it's no to people.
That'll be helpful. So, Councillor Summers.
Perhaps I can ask, has there any office been hired for 106 months? I know we've gone, two have moved on, I believe. We have replacements for those people?
Through you, Chair. Yes, we have replacements, and the project to spend the £9 million is in the delivery phase of that, so the colleagues are working on it has changed. As Councillor Summers said, a couple have moved on with a new manager looking after, or somebody promoted within on there. So
I'm not sure if those names have been circulated, but is it possible to have them circulated?
Yes, I introduced them, but I'll confirm those.
Thank you. Action 106, that's for action 94, so for audit's completion. That follow-up audit's completion be captured in action tracking for head of corporate performance. This is I'm at a loss to know what that refers to, other than the obvious that it refers to follow-up audits done by presumably internal audit. Again, back to June 2021. As per action 95 and 94 above, we will ask then if head of corporate performance can comment on that at the March meeting. If
Yes, is that what should be reevaluated? Because it's been there for a while and it doesn't seem to be catching any attention.
Well, it's as per action 94, and action 94 will be reported on at the March meeting. So I'm just drawing to the attention of the action owner that we anticipate a response at the March meeting on that one. 110, trying to move on. This is a briefing note on the management of council estate to be provided to committee members. And a report to Cabinet in autumn 2022. So I'm a little uncertain why this action remains outstanding if the report has been provided to Cabinet, which essentially should be acceptable, unless a report hasn't yet been provided.
The report hasn't been presented to Cabinet yet. Yeah.
Right, well that's why. And are we anticipating the report might be presented to Cabinet before May? Or?
Certainly, I've seen the draft report. I would need to check when it is in the timetable for plan.
Sorry, Councillor Summers.
I personally requested this on a number of occasions at a number of committees, and it's over the past 12 months, and I know for sure it still hasn't come, and I'm kind of disappointed that we haven't seen an asset, what our assets are and what's the strength of our assets and what needs doing to those assets. It's a lot of money involved, and I think we need to get this sorted. I'm sorry, but it's going on and on and on. It's a big part of the council. The council does, and we need this information ASP. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Summers. Is the information you're looking for? Yeah. The descriptor management of council estate is a fairly broad and wide one. I'm just asking if and Mr Lovegrove can confirm that the report is likely to reflect an answer to the question that Councillor Summers is asking.
Through Chair, I think it is. The report does focus on the operational assets and the investment assets that we hold, because clearly we want to make sure that they're being either operational assets are being used appropriately, investment assets are getting the return we want. There's clearly a class of assets where management is a much lower level. So a lot of the cultural assets and historical assets that we own because of the public authority. So if you're expecting the report to have details about those, then it doesn't have a great deal of detail because it's more about the operational.
It's a degree of the granularity as well that
So
the board has produced.
So where do we go to get, okay, for example, Town Hall, Shire Hall, all the other assets that we own, I need to know what we own. I can go and search it out, yeah, but, and the value of those assets and what needs doing to those assets. Now, that was supposed to be done by auditors, so I've asked that question, as you know. So we're not getting that, so I don't know what the next step is. Sorry about pushing that one, but.
That's all right, Councillor Summers. I'm just trying to think of a resolution. Perhaps if Councillor Summers could be shown the draft report, given that management is happy to do that. Councillor Summers can then see whether he's going to cover the majority of the questions that he has in his mind, and I'm sure then that would satisfy the action that the committee's put forward to.
Just Chair, could I suggest as a way forward, we have a briefing with Councillor Summers and the key officers about the draft report, and Councillor Summers can feed into that conversation to make sure we're meeting on it.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Davis.
Can I ask, does land come underneath asset management? Or you're talking about buildings, but what about
yes,
land?
so in the broadest sense, so it does include land, and the council has a large number of land holdings across the counties. We know that range from small pieces of highway verge to some of the more complicated holdings of land that are some of the land we held back from the farm sales, for example, those type of things. And then there are also the common areas, which are quite a complex legal area the council is involved with. So it is in its broadest sense.
So will that be included in the report you're going to be giving out?
Yes, it will do. But in terms of us managing things like the highway verges, that will be minimal information because we don't actually manage those in the way that we manage the Shire Hall, or the, say, 3 Elms industrial estate.
But I'm interested in the amount of land that belongs to Herefordshire in our area in Bromyard. I'd like to know what areas actually belong to Herefordshire Council.
I'm very happy to have a briefing with individual members to talk about the land holdings in your area.
Thank
We've
you.
got an online system we can take you through and show you everything
Thank you.
we own. So happy to have that.
Yes, there is an online system which is quite user friendly, if I say so.
Oh, well, that's
And,
helpful.
you can find parcels of land that we own.
It's one on the website.
I believe it may well be accessed through our website. You can look at council owned land.
Oh, right.
So
Thank you.
thank you. Right, 115. Corporate performance, consider the increase of housing violence in rural areas and the impact these may have on the risk register. So this says this should be picked up as part of work and taken forward by the Director's strategy and looking at the Council's approach to risk. So again, we'll ask the Director's strategy to comment on that in March. 125. 151 officer to explore and report back to the committee on who in the council undertakes garden audits. Now, I do remember that in fact we're showing that report. That's fine. Thank you. Those two. Yeah. Still October 21. Our own effectiveness performance skills matrix, appreciating that the complexion of this committee will change in May. presumption is that we'll put that off until the June date, and then the new committee can consider if that's reasonable to do. Action number 129, moving to 2020, a meeting date of November 21. The information on the relevant internal audit recommendations can be circulated regularly to scrutiny committee members. Right, so this comes back a readout for people who may be watching. At the meeting on 27th of June 2022, it was requested the consideration given to an early completion of this action, given that the interim officers in place have got performance and the statutory security positions. Due date was then identified as September 22, and this has not been progressed. A meeting will be held, it says, with the statutory scrutiny officer to agree the approach that internal audit recommendations can be more widely shared, and that's at a due date of October 22. So again, we've had no update on that action.
No, Chair, it's slightly confusing. The interim statutory scrutiny officer post for another authority recently. So the new statutory scrutiny officer will be in place, I understand, during February. So I guess that'd be the opportunity to review that with the action owners.
Thank you then. So that action remains, and we would request from the new statutory scrutiny officer an update as and when. Action number 138, an update provided on the long-standing issues of the reconciliation of holding accounts, particularly in the context of previous internal progress reports. That has been completed. And the comment is the payroll follow-up report can be provided to committee members if that is helpful. So the committee member wants to see the payroll follow-up report.
No, thank you.
We're happy that it's been done.
Yeah, happy is working with them.
Appreciate that work's been done. Action number 140. We've got here a reference to action 13, which has now disappeared from our list, I think. An update will provide on how the company plan will link to the wider resilient plans, particularly in terms of adult social care. This is referring back to the annual government statement 2021 actions. And we've got here the latest timeline for the development of the health and wellbeing strategy is provided in the agenda, healthcare and wellbeing strategy scrutiny committee agenda for 23rd of January 2023. Now the question to my mind is, does that meet our action? Councillor Bartlett.
Sure. I mean, certainly the progress report starts off that the recovery plan will likely form part of the new and emerging economic strategy and health and wellbeing strategy. So it's a little bit ambiguous to start off with anyway. But yeah.
Having that, bearing that in mind, bearing in mind that we're now sort of through the COVID period, I'm just conscious of how useful this action is actually going to be.
Yes, because it started off as an idea that the COVID recovery would be a plan in its own right.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems to have become the recovery within other strategies.
So would the committee be content that we discharge this action?
Yes.
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 I tend to bigger up.
So
Well, I think it will be. No. Councillor Summers.
I can understand letting this go as long as we put in health and well-being aspect, mental health, etc. in, because that I don't think is being really looked at. We're following what the country is doing or what the world is doing, but we're not doing anything for Hereford. Now I know there's things planned, but we need to make sure that the mental health pandemic, which we're almost in now, is looked at in some form. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps I could ask the clerk if we could take an action to write to the Health and Wellbeing, Healthcare and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. The agenda's, well, that's already gone, hasn't it?
Indeed,
But to ask them to ensure that mental health, aspects of mental health.
it certainly was flagged at that meeting by Councillor Summers as well, and of course we'll capture it in the minutes as well, but I don't know if it's available at the moment. We do have to have Matt Pearce, Director of Public Health, on the line if you just want a quick update on the progress of the strategy.
Matt, if you're able to give us an update on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I can join you in person. So yeah, I think the strategy timelines are outlined to the health and care and wellbeing scrutiny. So we're aiming for an April sign off for that strategy. I think Councillor Summers will probably know as well that we've done the consultation feedback on the health and wellbeing strategy in terms of its priorities, and actually mental health has come out as one of the top priorities. So we're currently taking that to the Health and Wellbeing Board over the coming months to ratify whether mental health and wellbeing will be a priority alongside potentially best start in life. But we still very much see the health and wellbeing strategy as a clear vehicle for addressing some of the issues that arose during the pandemic. And I know the big economic plan was obviously endorsed at Cabinet last week too.
Thank you, Matt. I think I'm content that the actions taken and progress will meet the annual government statement 2021 actions. Is committee happy that we?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll take that action off the list. Thank you. 143. We now have the annual report on the code of conduct being presented at the March meeting, so that will accept that. 146, corporate risk register. So we're looking at integral components supplied by partnerships, and consideration be given to identify those partnerships and the relevant risk entries. It's been rumbling for a little while. So did you want to speak, Councillor Bartlett?
I did, yes. Given the work that's been done by this committee, possibly starting before I joined this committee actually, so we have done a self-service review of all of these partnerships, but if I remember rightly, it raises as many questions as it answers. And I feel that given the fact that we need a robust working relationship with our partners, this is actually quite an important action to keep drifting. So I'm not quite sure whether we have a process for batting things up for this, so to speak. But this would certainly be one that I'd be batting for, to try and get our kind of handle on all of those partnerships, and indeed, you know, what the value of these partnerships is, and are we working as well as we could be?
Yeah, probably whether we're working as well as we could be is a question for scrutiny rather than governance. But I think that this particular action was really to try and identify any of the corporate risks where we were reliant upon our partners supplying an integral component of the delivery. And at the moment, the corporate risk register refers only, I think, to Heritage Council, and doesn't identify any third parties. So again, I think what I'd press Ethical Performance to speak to directors and consider whether we can identify third parties in those risk registers. That's a reasonable thing to ask. So that action remains. 147. The workshop to be arranged in November, October 22. Well, that's to be consider the first iteration of the strategic risk register, examine one to use detail. We're still, I think, waiting for that. It all happens to have to happen for the new committee rather than on the old one.
Mm.
So my recommendation would be that it remains and that it's identified for May or June next year.
That's
So
traffic.
sensible.
Yeah.
I understand we have a new head of corporate performance anyway, so it needs to get bedded in first.
Yeah, well that's reasonable as well. And then we can't go through. Those three. 149, rethinking governance. The further review of the constitution, for clarity, presentation of what the government section be considered in order to separate them from other functions. Plus updates on progress within the operation and delivery of outstanding actions arising from the rethinking governance working group. It's a shame that Councillor Balderson isn't here to advise us on that. My proposal is that we keep that action live and revisit it at the March meeting.
I agree with that. The board, scrutiny management board is going through teething stuff right now, so it really needs to be looked at. It's a chance to settle in more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Summers. 153, Auditor's Annual Report 2021. That further details are provided on the government's and oversight arrangements, the board's reference in the report, e.g. Hooper Limited, with an indication of timeline for any updated arrangements. And we are now aware, in fact, that a paper went to Cabinet in earlier this month. It's not reflected here. And I also am now aware that the government's arrangements for Hoople were in a paper which came to the Audit Governance Committee in, I think, 2018, November 2018. And that had been brought to my attention. So if anybody wants to look at what the current arrangements are, governance of Hoople, they were reported in a paper by the Head of Legal Services to the Audit Governance Committee in November 2018. As I hadn't been aware of previously, but that is the case. So that has come to that's gone to Cabinet, been approved by Cabinet. The work involved really involves the creation of a Cabinet subcommittee, which will act as almost a supervisory board, I think, to an advisory board to Hoople, and to any other third parties where we have a more than significant stake, I presume. Now, there will be some arrangements for the governance on that subcommittee, which will have to be corporate audit and governance will have to be involved with. And those will, I think, have to be approved by full council. I'm not hearing any noises otherwise. So I suggest we keep that action in, but that we note that there has been progress. Thank you. Councillor Summers.
Yeah, just on the matter of Hoople, they're getting into social. We already have social, so we've got 2 things coming in at social and probably 3, a couple of other ones are outside partners. So I think it's something we need to know better where we're at in social care. If we're spread out and it's not, nobody knows what's going on, or I would imagine they do, but with Hoople bringing in people, we already have staff in social. How do the 2 mingle? In-house, because we have a social care, but we have staff, we've hired staff for, and Hoople's now involved with social. I don't know how it's managed. Anyway, I'm not sure if it's anything to do with us, but it is a concern.
Yeah, I don't know whether Mr. Lovegrove wants to comment on that. I would say that if Hoople are supplying staff as they'd be supplying staff as any other agency would supply staff. So
Okay, well that is
through that process. That would be my understanding.
Chair, yes, just to confirm, I'm a director of Hoople Limited at the moment, so I have a number of hats on there. Hoople does provide staff a whole range of activities, including the social care side and on a lot of the teaching bank staff that we provided for. Hoople also runs Hoople Care, so it runs a registered care home, Hillside and the like, so there are a number of elements that Hoople are actually involved with. The council doesn't run any care homes. That is the work that was transferred across to Hoople. But it's a valid point that there are a number of parts of this process. Hoople arranged to come to Scrutiny Management Board. It's on their work plan. I'm not sure exactly which meeting, but they're going to have a look at it as well. As the Chair said, the Cabinet have made a decision about the committee.
There is a bit of a concern on crossover, and it's something we're supposed to be watching as far as budgets are concerned. So it may not be costing us anything as far as the budget, but it may be, and I don't know. And if I don't know, then other people are asking the same questions. So it's something I think we need to keep on top of. I'm not sure where we put that, if we do it or put it through the scrutiny, I don't know. But I understand that Hoople might be going to the Scrutiny Management Board. I'm not sure if that's still on or not. So, thank you.
Is that the case?
Is it possible? Thank you. Is it possible that we can have a list of exactly what Hoople do actually cover, rather than have to go in and look here and look there? If it was all in one page, for example, it would be very helpful for us councillors.
Chair, I'm very happy to, we'll circulate the business plan for Hoople, which explains what it does and all the services it provides. So
Thank you.
We'll make that action.
Thank you for that one.
Thank you for that. So my suggestion is we keep it on our list, but we note the progress update as that goes through. Action 159, progress report on internal audit activity. The member development team invites to consider opportunities to enhance training for all members on raising concerns with statutory officers and on initiating call-ins and other scrutiny activity. And the action now is gone forward to June 23. Director Governance, having considered the time remaining to the next election, believes that this activity should form part of the members' induction after the next local election, which I think will be accepted. 160. Further information to provide to committee members on the timeline for moving non-capital items onto the Verto system. The progress update we've got here is that the paper will be presented to the September 2022 meeting. I don't know whether things have moved on in the interim.
Chair, they have been moved across, but apologies, we will bring a paper to your March meeting.
Thank you. Item 164, minutes and action tracker. Action 122 and 64. So this is to do with the new transformation director stroke which is now the interim director, effectively the interim director of strategy. The interim director has been posted since the end of July, fixed term 12 months, post holds a senior responsible officer, transformation programme, updates the programme of provided for members for the members annual chief executive's briefing in December. And am I assuming that, did I understand that we have a new director of strategy, or is it still the interim director of strategy?
Still the interim.
Still the interim director of strategy. It's the new. Right, thank you for that. So an update on the programme was provided for members annual chief executive within the annual chief executive briefing in December. So I think we can say that the action as it states here has been completed. 166, again, an item for the members development group, and that's being postponed until after the new election. I'm content with. Everybody else is 171. Now this comes to Councillor Bartlett's interest.
Yes, no, before we come to another interest of mine, just on that 166 that we've just briefly discussed about induction after local election, can we actually put that with 159, which is induction after the next local election, and take the two together, so that we don't, it might make it easier for the next looking at iteration of this, that things that's got the same work
Activity should be together. That's good.
Makes sense.
Thank you. So, update on internal audit recommendations, 171, an update on the work undertaken on specific partnerships. So, the update we have is the council has sometime now worked with external lawyers to review external companies which council shareholdings, directorships, and or has granted loan finance to. This review has resulted in strengthened structured arrangements managing these key partnerships. Cabinet at this meeting of 12th of January, as I referred to, agreed the creation of shareholders committee, composed of 4 members of cabinet. Committee meet publicly, and normal rules of governance will apply to it. Shareholder committee will be responsible for making decisions on behalf of the council as well as the shareholder. In addition, the cabinet also considered and agreed in all terms of service agreements, or the service agreement with People Limited. I think
This is slightly different though, isn't it, to,
well, this includes, I think, more than Hoople.
yeah, but it's slightly different to the overall workings of a very diverse amount of partnerships.
I think the committee, if I'm remembering, the committee's concern was that when we had the report on the significant partnerships, there were a number of partnerships that hadn't seemed to have provided a more detailed structural reply in that report, and that we were hoping that a revised report or a further consultation with those partnerships would provide further detail.
So are we putting 146 and
I don't think we can 171 together. I think they're slightly different. 146 is very specifically people. No, 146.
Very corporate of the departmental risks have an integral component
Yeah.
described by partnerships. consideration be given to identifying those partnerships in the relevant.
That's talking about identifying the risks specifically within the risk register, covering those items. The 171 really indicates that there is a paucity of information on some of the work with significant partnerships provided in the report that came, and we were looking for an update on any further work that could have been done with the partnerships. I mean, we talk here, the comment was initially made that arrangements for the overview of significant partnerships are part of the broader work being undertaken in relation to companies to which the council is a shareholder. This work is ongoing. I suppose my understanding was this included work on partnerships where the council isn't a shareholder, but we needed to understand further how governance of the arrangement where we weren't shareholders was being done.
That's correct, and that's the wider piece of work that seems to have lost in translation.
Yeah. So,
seems to make sense to bring 141 and 146 and 170.
but I think
It's a similar topic.
it's a similar topic. One reflects risk. Well, they both reflect risk, which is why we're looking at them. Perhaps I would ask that the risk owner could reconsider whether they could revisit the report on external partnerships and identify any further work that's been done to reflect the paucity of information from some of the participants. Because thinking back, that was a concern that was raised specifically. I think that there's a reasonable presumption that report is going to be done regularly.
Andrew's thinking.
Because you'd expect to ask the same question of each partnership on an annual basis.
On a regular basis,
and sort of build the report out.
Yes.
Right, where we are. So 171, 172 has been completed. Thank you. 175 has been completed. Thank you. 176, July 22. Update the finance contract procedure rules. So the updated contract procedure rules have been published, but publication of the updated financial procedure rules is pending. Things would be provided to members in due course. And we haven't yet had those. Have the financial procedure rules been updated and published yet?
They haven't been published, but we'll make sure that's happened well before your March meeting.
Thank you. And while doing just the final page, and we know we've done it. 177, draft annual government statement 2022. New membership, take all, well, that's new membership of the audit governance committee. See briefing on technical arrangements and implemented in the next municipal year. So that's fine. Due date. Right, committee meeting on 21st of November. It was requested that the briefing on technical arrangements and implemented provided in advance of the scrutiny management board on the 14th of March, as it was a considered item, people limited on that date. So is this the item on the subcommittee and the governance arrangements for people that's been considered at the Scrutiny Management Board. I'm looking at still upgrown. You did refer to a paper going.
Yes, my understanding is Scrutiny Management Board, but it's on their work programme.
It's on their work programme.
My understanding of their request that they want an all-encompassing briefing around arrangements people, which will pick up the technical arrangements, and it'll include.
So I think the action, if members of this committee want to attend, either virtually or in person, that meeting of the Scrutiny Management Board at the 14th of March, we can pick up a presentation on technical arrangements.
Seems crazy to have it on two committees.
Yes, yeah, well, I agree. And I'm presuming if that item is then recorded, then any new committee can go back on. So that's fine. So once we've had that presentation in March, that item will be completed. 178, progress report on internal audit activity. The next progress report, internal audit activity, including an update on the risk-based approach to the audit work on grants, provide indication of its position relative to other authorities in terms of the effective management of grants. Got a work in progress, due date this meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give you an update on that is work in progress at the moment. We've been meeting with the grant working group, and as they build the picture of all of the grants that are out there, we're able to consider the bigger picture and how we can consolidate that process. So I would fully expect you to have a report for the next meeting.
Thank you. And 179, scope of ICT governance framework review provided to committee members. Scope of the framework review has been provided and will be circulated to committee members shortly. I'm not sure I've seen it.
No, Chair, sorry, I was just anticipating a couple of other updates that I was going to put into one pack for you. It's hopefully the next few days.
Okay. So that'll be later this, in February. Action number 180, let's register. This is to assess to the risk areas of E28, phosphate pollution in the lug, and further consideration into wider event applications, also to potential litigations. So that update was requested. We've got a date of November 23 for that, so that's quite a lengthy.
Chair, I'm sorry, but I don't really want to accept that.
Right,
so this is,
that might be a typo.
Yeah. We could at least have an update if we could not, to have an update to be due by November 2023 is it's not a difficult question.
No, it may well be that the due date was November 20. Well, that's very quick, November 22. But we'll ask if we can have an update for March meeting for that.
Or at least an update of why they can't update us for practically a year.
Yeah. I agree. I propose to leave the three from the November meeting as actions in the list to be dealt with. Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence in going through that. I think it's useful for us to spend some time on our action list once every few meetings, and we can see where we go with that.
Chair,
So
it would seem that we have got, March is going to be an interesting meeting.
it may well be, but it may well be that we get a report to say all these actions are completed. So.
How wonderful would that be?
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And proceeding now on to agenda item 7. Right, and the progress report on internal audit activity at last. Thank you for your forbearance. The purpose of this is to update members on the progress of the internal audit work and to bring their attention to any key internal audit control issues arising from work recently completed, to enable the committee to monitor the performance of the internal audit team against the approved plan, and to assure the committee that action is being taken on risk-related issues identified by the internal audit. Now, we have both the, hesitate to call it the standard, but the normal progress report of internal audit activity, but we also have a special report on supplements dealing with the public health grant and where and how it is spent and governed. And because internal audit came up with several, I think, category 2 comments on the public health report. We also have the new Director of Public Health present on Zoom to answer any questions the committee might have and to introduce that area of internal audit work. I don't know if you want to just comment on the report itself.
Yes, thank you, Chair. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ian Halstead. I'm the Director of SWAP Internal Audit for you. This is a normal report. It's Q3, so it covers the period April to December. And I'll just give you the headlines, really, because they're the important things. In terms of delivery, we've delivered 28 pieces of work, so they're complete. We have 2 in draft and we have 15 that are in progress at the moment. There are 11 other pieces of work that are either planned or in preparation, and many of those are actually in preparation at the moment. To give you an idea of the profile of the work we look at, obviously as a committee, we've discussed on many occasions the fact that some of our work at times of the year is very grant-based and grant certification-based. But what's happened is the usual profile. So the second half of the year now, it's much more focusing on the assurance work. So over that second part, 78% of our work is looking at giving you assurance. So it's opinion-based work. So in terms of the delivery, I'm pleased to say that we are on track to deliver the audit programme that we have, and I will be able to give you an annual opinion at the end of the year. In terms of plans and the risk-based process that we use, wherever possible, we align our work to the risk register, and that can be shown in the graphic. But we always need risks change. That's the important thing, and so we need to reflect and react to those accordingly. We can't cover every aspect because some of the things aren't particularly auditable by internal audit, but certainly there should be an alignment. And a risk-based approach, you should see that alignment, and we'll work to improve that alignment. We are just entering into the planning process again, so we're refreshing plans at the moment. We have an agile basis for that, so we keep adding new things to the list, but certainly the pipeline needs a review. And part of that process is going to involve engaging with the directors of the organisation and also the chief executive. And I think that's really important to get the top table in those discussions. But we'll also give all the services the opportunity to engage and input into that process. So we will be extending the pipeline in the next report. But overall, I think coverage is again satisfactory to enable me to have an opinion across the wider control and governance networks that we have. In terms of outcomes, we've made no priority 1 recommendations in this period, in this quarter, and there are no reports with high corporate fundamental risks in them. And the table I've got at the end of the report shows where we are in terms of the outputs from our audits and the recommendations that we have. So it shows you where we are in the work programme. So I will go on to talk about the areas of significant concern at the end of the report to allow Matt to obviously feed into that. But overall, for this period, the indicative annual opinion for 22-23 looks like being reasonable assurance, and that means that we think you've got sound systems of governance, risk management and control in place. So unless there's any question on that, I'll move on to the areas of significant concern, if that's all right, Chair.
Councillor Davis.
Sorry, will that include the 11 pieces that have to be completed?
At the end of the year, you will have all of those 11 pieces, and that will be included in the annual opinion that we give.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the specific concerns I'm bringing to your attention, and as your head of internal audit, it's my job to bring you items and areas where I think improvements need to be made. So we did a piece of work on the public health grant process. So this isn't the grants, it's not the sign off of the grants, it's the actual process that they use. And we identified this concern through previous pieces of work that we did looking at grants. So we could, we thought there might be a pattern there. So we decided to look at the bigger picture. In terms of the summary of the findings, there were 5 priority 2s and 5 priority 3s. Obviously the priority 2s are more significant, but they covered areas such as the strategy not being updated. They looked at the monitoring process for allocating funds, and that was not formalised. They looked at somewhat an absence of oversight and scrutiny on the spending and the progress of some of those operations that were happening, and that included things like around performance monitoring, like KPIs and dashboards that would help support that. It looked at the fact that there was a very robust contract management part for the commission services in that area, but it wasn't quite as solid in areas where those services were delivered internally. So there was an improvement required there. And also at the end of 21-22 financial year, there was a significant underspend of the reserves there. The other areas of priority 3, quickly I'll just run through, but that was around weaknesses in the sign-off. It was around linkages between the outcomes and service plans to make sure that linkage exists and public health outcomes. It was perhaps a little bit overly focused on the finance elements rather than the outcomes and the delivery outcomes. It talked about the structure of the public health team that may not help the delivery of those public health outcomes again. It looked at historic custom and practice, things about how some of those opportunities may be restricted, about how those rolled out to different parts of the council. But overall, we had, as I say, we had 5 priority 2s, 5 priority 3s, and we gave it a limited assurance. So essentially, there were some significant gaps or weaknesses in that area. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I know, Max, you want to come in and just have a few words about the report itself. I just wondered if for the benefit of committee and anybody else, you could just explain the what a public health grant is, how much it is, where it gets spent, internal as opposed to external, so that we've got a sort of some conception of the amount of money that we're talking about and where the council spends it.
Yeah, no, happy to, Chair. So the grant itself is a grant that was awarded to the local authority from 2012 as part of the NHS Social Care Act. And there's certain conditions attached to that grant. So at the moment, it's just shy of about £10 million per year, which public health received directly from government. And as part of that grant, there are a certain number of conditions in terms of what that grant must be spent on, primarily public health duties and services. And that covers a breadth of activity. It can cover anything from obesity to mental health to preventative services. And there are certain number of mandatory requirements that we have to deliver as part of that grant. So there are things like health visiting service, the weighing and measuring of children in schools, sexual health provision, and substance misuse. So there are certain mandated elements we have to deliver. As part of that grant, we support a range of other public health outcomes across the council to the degree of around 2.5 million. And again, just recognising that actually councils do support public health outcomes primarily as a result of something we call the wider determinants of health that we do have long-lasting impacts on health and well-being. So that's really a kind of a summary, if you like, of the grant. Just for me to comment on the findings, I think it's, having been in post now for about 10 months, I think this has probably consolidated what I already know coming in as the new Director of Public Health. And obviously there's a supplementary paper to this report in terms of the actions that I'm taking to address those recommendations that Audit found.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Summers and Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I am taking from the first report that there are some concerns about monitoring of funding. Funding grants are usually given to partners. My concern is they're not always monitored that well. And sometimes council doesn't even know where the money is. I'm afraid this is going back 5 years now, and then more recently on the. So are we putting in better? I don't know how would you put it? Monitoring on funding that we get, we pass on to people, for example, like mine. Is funding being passed on to them? Does funding being passed on to children's, etc.? Are we keeping an eye on that stuff? Do we know how it's being spent, is what I'm saying. And I think you mentioned earlier that there were some thoughts on that. Can you give me a little more?
Is that, I'm not sure if that's one for Matt or for Ian.
I think
Ian mentioned it, so I am concerned about it, so.
Did you the report?
Did you understand what I said, basically?
I think my understanding, as I said, you're concerned about the audit of funding which is passed through the council to third parties who are under a contract with public health to deliver services on public health and the council's behalf. Did you find any concern over those transactions? My understanding from what you were saying was that you were content with the outcomes and the KPIs of the outcomes from third parties employed by the council, but your concern was with services that the council itself supplied and how we measured the effectiveness and efficiency of those services. I'm putting words in your mouth.
Thank you, Chair.
Is that my understanding correct?
Yes, somewhat. I mean, I think Matt's probably in a better position, but I can certainly say where we stand from an internal audit point of view. Certainly, at the end of a period, the council is required to get assurances around delivery and the financial aspects. And the internal audit found that there was some weaknesses in that process. So I think the weaknesses you're conveying, we found certainly, but I'm sure Matt can update.
Just want to verify that, Chair, because it has been an ongoing issue, I'm afraid. Thank you.
If I can just ask your indulgence, Councillor David, I just wanted to take that point further with Mr. Lovegrove. So this committee, from an audit and governance point of view, we provide to council that funding has been properly spent. And we really look to one officer to confirm that grants have been spent properly. And it's of concern to me that we've got an area of concern raised by internal audit that we can't necessarily prove those grants have been properly spent. And I think it's right that I ask you to comment on that, to reflect on where we made that assurance in previous years, and how, working with the new director, we can address those issues. I think that's pretty fundamental to our activity as a committee. I'll give you an opportunity to answer that, and then I'll proceed with questions. Thank you.
Chair, thank you for that. I share consider this isn't where we want to be, and I do thank SWAT for the work they've done for highlighting these areas, and as matters put forward in the paper, there is a clear plan to address these shortfalls to make sure that we improve this and going forward for the future. I expect this to be the annual governance statement. You'll see your later meetings as well, because this is quite a key area, we say, for spend across the council and really to get this better. But I think we've got a very clear plan now how we will improve things.
Thank you. Is, in terms of the risk, this funding, I presume, comes from the Department of Health? Is it? Or is it the Department of...
It is the, I think it is the Department of Health. It is a ring fence grant of 9.7 million pounds.
Okay. And is there any concern over any concerns that were raised by the department as to how we're spending this money?
No, there's an ongoing dialogue with the department about how this money is spent to make sure that we're delivering public health outcomes. As a council, we spend far more than the 9.6 million pounds on public health outputs and inputs, that interventions that we carry out. It's quite a complicated task of allocating actual spend to meet the criteria, because it meets a number of other criteria.
So I think as a committee, we'd hope that the Department of Health is reassured by the fact that we've carried out, or that SWAP have carried out an internal audit, and that we've identified areas for improvement. Councillor Davis, sorry, thank you for...
You covered it.
I do apologise then.
No, that's fine.
Councillor Bartlett and then Councillor Bolton.
Well, I'll just echo that you've probably covered all of our main concern. And so it's really we're talking about the internal distribution of money a lot of the time. So I think one of the things that struck me about this is, so we're talking about the process inconsistencies, but we're not actually, I'm not fully reassured about how much of the money involved is the money that's not being used wise for the project, that may then be remerged or generally put back into, presumably, the department directorate pot. So a little bit more understanding, I think, Andrew, on, are we talking about the bits of money that left over after a project that meets public health aims has been carried out? Are we talking about a project that didn't get off the ground? What are these types of money, the amounts of money we're talking about? And one of the things I would have thought that we should be looking at doing is that money being transferred then back into the central public health remit to be reallocated to another or an extended project, rather than it just staying in departments if that's what's happening, or directorates. Does that make sense? No, is this a lot of money? Is it bits that are left over after a public health remitted project is carried on? And if that money is then staying within the other directorates, shouldn't it be coming back to the public health central pot?
That might be... So Lovegrave's about to speak. I don't know whether, Matt, you wanted to comment on that, or whether Mr. Lovegrave's best position.
I think I was going to suggest Matt Pearce is probably the best person.
Matt, I don't know if you... Did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. I think Councillor Bartlett. So I think this has been accumulated over a number of years in terms of the amount of money from the public health grant that reaches other departments across the local authority. So as I said, it's, you know, in the region of 2.3 to 2.5 million at this moment in time. What we want to do as part of these recommendations is revisit that on an annual basis. So actually we're clear what that money is being spent on, what public health outcomes that's delivering, and how that aligns to the joint strategic needs assessment. So that's really where we are in terms of our recommendations. And actually I've done this in other local authorities before. So we almost have a kind of a very light touch agreement. So we have that information documented. So those services that are in receipt of that grant, they know that they're X amount of money they're getting, and we know what public outcomes they're delivering and the indicators and data that follows through from that. So I think it's an historic thing. I think we had quite a good allocation of public health grant when we come over from Primary Care Trust in 2012, but that said, we do need to review it on a regular basis, because health needs change over time, and therefore we need to make sure we're using that money in the best way to improve population health, and I think that's really important. I hope that answers your question.
I think so. It certainly answers the first two parts of the question. The third part of the question was, so the money that they asked for, bid for, got in their plan, if there's pieces of that money that doesn't get spent, which is the feeling I got from the from page, I think it was page 45, that yes, so that health funds and reserve funds are being utilised. If those bits of money left over, are they just being internalised into that directorate or the rest of the directorate work, or should they actually be coming back to you? Not personally, but to your public health.
Yeah, so if those allocations aren't used within those directorates, they come back into the public health central pot, and then we carry that over as a source of reserves. Some of the accrued reserves historically as well, we've done payment by results for some of our contracts. So maybe the providers haven't done as much activity as we expected, and therefore we obviously recoup some of that money. So in answer to your question, yeah, we do get the money back if they don't deliver or spend all of that money that's allocated. But we make the accountants, we actually transfer the money at the end of the year, so we don't get it back. We just don't give them as much as maybe what they initially anticipated.
Councillor Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. Most of what I was going to say has been covered anyway. There was a comment made about the reserves are being underspent in the area. There was a comment you made on that area. My point was, are those reserves, or the grants, sorry, if they're not spent, do they go back to where they came from, or do we retain them for other areas of the health? We get a grant of what, 9.67 million, you said, Andrew? So we don't spend that in the agreed period with the ring fence. Does it go back, or do we retain that? Anything left over?
Chair, we retain that, so it goes into an earmarked reserve.
It goes, and that can be used, we don't lose it.
Yeah.
That's fine, I was just, that question. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Summers and Councillor Davis.
There's before me.
Right, sorry, Councillor Davis.
When mental health area applies for a grant and it's accepted, do they have to keep on then applying every year? Or is it like a 3-year grant they're given? I'm just thinking that I know a place that, you know, they struggle every year to try and get a grant given to them. Does that make sense?
So you're talking about third-party provision of services.
Yes.
The third party applying either through an expression of interest to the council, or the council approaching them to deliver services on behalf of the council. And are those always annual grants? I think probably Matt, you might be able to answer that, whether you have sort of contracts which are for periods of 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or whether they're always annual contracts and that sort of thing.
Yeah, happy to answer that. So the public health grant itself, we get that annually. And actually, we still don't know what the allocation of grant is for next year yet, even though we're coming close to next financial year. So that's always a huge frustration. In terms of grant to external organisations, third party, the voluntary sector, it really depends on the contract and the value of that contract. So if we're commissioning somebody like Wye Valley Trust for our health visiting service, for example, that's a value of £2.5 million per year, and we maybe do that over 3 to 5 years. If it's a voluntary and community sector, which may be the type of organisation you're referring to, that varies. So sometimes it can be a year, 2 years, or 3 years. There is a parallel piece of work being undertaken by the council called the State of the Voluntary Sector Support. The State of the Sector around the voluntary sector support. And actually, a lot of organisations would want a bit more sustainability and longevity. So actually, could you commit to a 3-year contract? So it does vary in terms of the amount of allocation of the grant and the fund, and what those services are provided. But I recognise that some organisations want that sustainability, but it obviously depends on the wider council finances.
And how,
Do you want to expand that, or?
well, I wanted to know how do we know how much has been allocated to a particular third party we're talking about? I mean, is there a page that I can go onto to see how much?
Right, so any,
asked for?
right, so from memory, again, speaking, I could pass you over to Mr. Lumber, but I'll test and see if I understand what. There should be, every contract that the council has with a third party should be published somewhere. I couldn't put my finger at the moment on the web page that I can find them, but I'm sure Mr. Lumber will directly.
Yes, we have the contracts register, which we publish on the website, and we also publish payments every £500 on the website. So we make sure the minutes have the link to get people to the webpage.
Brilliant, thank you.
Councillor Bonner?
Thanks. And this, I think, probably a question for you, Ian. I'm looking at the findings pages. So from bottom of page 48 onto page 49, finding number 7. There was no evidence provided, service plans documenting demonstrating how repairs were reinvested, reserve funding, etc. The progress, as reported by management, is this action has yet to be progressed. It is anticipated that as part of the development of the Memorandum of Understanding with service areas in receipt of the public health grant, areas will stipulate in their service plan. So I'm happy to see that the action looks like it's going to be part of the MOU, but at the end of that phrase, as part of the MOU with service areas in receipt of the public health grant, areas will stipulate in their service plan. Feels like there should be a little bit more explanation there? Or am I just missing the grammar of that means that they've got to stipulate in their service plan?
I can see that the process is there, the improvement process is there. What an action plan is a fairly agricultural way of showing how that improvement that's going to occur. I'm sure that Matt, I am assured that it's moving in the right direction, the improvement's there, but I'm sure that Matt will probably be able to give you a deeper understanding of how that issue is going to be addressed.
Thank you, because it just, to my mind, and there is no full stop or anything at the end of that last line, that it just feels like there should have been some more writing there to finish off the sentence.
Councillor Summers?
Thank you, Chair. Back to the funding coming in, and you'd say you're doing it yearly, and letting us know what's happening with it yearly. I don't think yearly is enough. I prefer to see it half yearly at least. We have funding coming in quite often that I've had to chase where it is. For example, perinatal. I know when we transferred mental health to Herefordshire, Worcester, I think there's about 6 million came in from central government. Worcester got some, we got the biggest portion, which was about 6 million. I believe that went to mine, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what mine did with that money. I've been trying to find out because, mental health and GP practices, etc., was on the table, but I don't see too much action from it. So I think we need to know when that funding comes in into our partners. For example, I know that perinatal, they got 12 months and they got more, but we don't know about it, but I understand they got another year. So I think if you're getting that information, we need to know that it's there. but, because sometimes it's a fairly big sum, like 6 million, was quite a substantial amount of money, and I was hoping it was going towards GP clinics, making sure there's a mental health GP clinics, and very little came back on it. So I think we need more auditing on that. Anyway, that's just my feelings. I'm not sure if it fits with us or not.
Thanks,
Can you explain it better for me, Chair?
Yeah, well, I think I'll try. I think so I think the access to payments made to third parties would be in the link in the interest, so you can then see what payments have been made to, for instance, Mind. There is then a question that you can raise either through the committee or by directly going to public health and saying what is the contract that has been delivered for this. You mentioned 6 million. I don't know, whatever the sum is, and you can get more detail on that. I'm hesitant for the committee to be looking at every. Getting like a 6 monthly report and then payment made, because I think we'd be having another meeting a month just on that.
Yeah, and just in comment to that, I think we're talking about processes here, and if you get the processes right and you get the feedback is right and the governance is right, then you can have assurance that the other things are working correctly around that.
Yeah.
So feedback is important. So you having feedback is important. What I will say is that as part of our role, we've looked at the process here, but we also look at individually a number of specific grants as they come through, and we have to sign those off against the conditions. So outcomes is part of that and how they spend it. So we look at individual ones in much more detail as well. So that will give you assurance as well from that level.
Well, so just to add to that, perhaps if you notice something is not quite right in that from A to B, you could let maybe a committee know this needs to be looked at or something. I'm not sure how that would be worked, Chair. It's back to you again.
I'm sure that Matt would be if Matt had concerns, that he would raise the query and ask. I suspect, first of all, to ask either the contract management to look at it, or to look at asking internal audit to look at it if it was of sufficient magnitude that it was not quite causing them restless nights, but causing a concern to management function. Matt, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two slightly different things here. The first is on external contractual arrangements with those third-party organisations. So we don't have a huge number of contracts with externalisations within public health. There's probably 4 or 5 big providers. I'm fairly assured that we've got quite robust contract management arrangements in place for that. I think the second point is the arrangements with the public health money that is dispersed across the local authority, and that assurance of that delivering public health outcomes. So that they're 2 slightly different things. But I mean, me as a director of public health, I have to sign off the grant every year to show that this has actually delivered public health outcomes. So there's certainly that responsibility on myself. But I'm assured that the external arrangements we have in place with our providers are pretty robust, but that's certainly something I'm keen to look at and work with Ian on.
If I could just ask as well, on the final page of our report, as it were, the report to committee, I'm not sure what page number that has. On my printed out version, it's page number 8, but I suspect within the pack it'll have a different number. I was just curious that we had a final paragraph that seemed to have been added to the report in a different font. Which always piques my interest. It says acknowledge that there are good working relationships and evidence of collaboration between the Public Health Directorate and key financial officers across many public health funded areas and activities have been noted. All key officers are keen to move away from historic ways of working where appropriate and continue working in collaboration. Now, I can understand, having read the findings and details, that some might find some suggestion of, I'm trying to think of an adjective, and that's not to make a good one, friction perhaps is the word, between what finance initiatives might be looking at and what public health initiatives might be looking at. So a couple of questions relating to that. Do you have any finance functions embedded in the public health team? I mean, do you have finance functionaries within that team of your own, or are you totally sort of reliant on corporate services supplying that function? Also, there is an area that has been identified by internal audit, which again I found very interesting, that internal audit were identifying the requirement for a business manager, or suggesting that a business manager might alleviate some of the issues raised. And I hadn't come across internal audit previously ever commenting on sort of management structures in that way, but that maybe I just haven't picked up on it before. So I just wondered if you wanted to comment on those two areas.
No, happy to. I mean, the public health team itself is very small. So in permanent establishment, we're at 7 FTE. So that gives you a size of the scope of the team. It's not very big at all. And in terms of your first question with regards to finance, so we don't have any finance embedded, but we do have a good working relationship with our finance colleagues. So we meet monthly with Andrew's team. We look at the budget. We obviously work with our portfolio holder. I've certainly had a good relationship since I've come into post, and I'm keen to maintain that. I think part of the challenge has been that Hereford has had a number of directors of public health, which I'm sure you're aware of. So I think that hasn't really helped in terms of the continuity and keeping oversight of this grant. So that's certainly something I want to improve on. Your final point about a business officer, I don't want to comment too much on this because I'm about to consult with my team a week today about a new service structure. But in terms of some of the recommendations and actually including a role within that team that will give better oversight and assurance in terms of the public health grant, that's certainly something I'm seriously considering. But as I said, I don't want to preempt what I'm consulting my staff on. I don't think that would be fair if I said that to the committee.
Well, thank you for that. That is sort of reassurance, I think, to the committee that those things are considered.
Thank you, Chair.
Have we any other questions or recommendations? If not, I will just refer back to the agenda. The recommendations are A, to note the internal audit plan and pipeline of future work to ensure that there's sufficient coverage and delivery to give an annual opinion. B, to review the areas of activity and concern and be satisfied that necessary improvements are outlined and delivered. And C, to consider the assurance provided and the recommendations the report makes, commenting on its comment as necessary. Are we content we've covered those areas?
I have to thank the office for some answer some of the questions because it's some good stuff. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Matt, for taking the time to come to committee and comment on the report provided, and thank you to Ian and his team for that report. I'll just check because I don't think we came up with any specific
no, Chair, but as
recommendations.
Mr. Lovegrove suggested, we can put links to various websites and that were referred to during the meeting, so make sure those guys and people.
Thank you. If the committee is content, then we'll pass on. Thank you. Yes. Can I suggest we take just a 10-minute comfort break now?
The water's cold.
And we're live again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and welcome back to the Audit and Governance meeting of Hereford Council, held on Monday the 30th of January 2023. Our next item on the agenda is item number 8, the Corporate Risk Register. And the purpose of examining the Corporate Risk Register is to consider the status of the Council's Corporate Risk Register in order to monitor the effectiveness of risk management within the performance management framework. And if committee bear in mind any recommendations, we may wish to determine any recommendations and to effectively ensure effective risk management and put those forward. So we are reviewing the corporate risk register. Appy Ready is on Zoom with us. Appy, I don't know whether you want to make any comments about changes that's been made since the last time we saw corporate risk register or this report, or anything you want to bring to our attention before I open it up to committee to ask any questions.
Thank you, Chair. So the corporate risk register has been updated with the direct rate risks and any which have a higher probability of 16 and over. We also mentioned that there is a strategic review for the risk register which is happening, and those papers for the strategic risk will come to this assurance board by the end of March. In terms of the actual risk register, bear with me, I'm getting the documents.
Have you got the documents?
Yes.
Have you got the documents in front of you? Yeah. Are you happy to take questions?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, okay. I've got Councillor Bartlett, I think it's got one or two to come forward.
Chairman, I have got several, and I'll take them individually, and let others also. One of my questions is not completely, I suppose it's my musings as much as anything. So on the main report, we've got a list of how many current corporate risk we have by directorate and corporate. And it strikes me that we've got quite a lot that quite often seem to be fairly static in terms of every time the report comes to us, they turn up in the tables as they haven't moved. And I'm just wondering, as part of the looking at our risk registers, do we look at static risks that have been the quarter after quarter, year after year, and look at them to see whether they are still relevant to be on there, and why they've never changed, they're just sat there. And that's a bit of an odd question, but it was one that struck me from the amount of risks that we've got, and the amount that always seems to sit there with no change. And I just wondered whether we were being robust enough in checking on those risks that were just sitting there. Does that make sense?
Let me respond. So we have agreed as a council for a proper approach for reviewing the risk registers going forward. We have agreed that DLTs going forward are going to look at the entire direct rate risks, and anything which is rated as risk of 9 or higher will be reviewed by DLT before any escalations to corporate risk register. This is already in place, and Q3, there was quite a bit of scrutiny and checks for the risks which are there in the direct rate risk registers. And going forward, the rating of the risk also will be looked by the DLT. So yes, there is a proper process for reviewing the risk registers, both the direct rate as well as the corporate. The corporate risk register, CLT agreed that they're going to take time as part of the CLT meetings going forward, and then review anything which has come for escalations.
Thank you. So the fact that it's been sat there quarter after quarter after quarter doesn't mean that it hasn't been assessed. It really is just a static risk. It hasn't got bigger, it hasn't got smaller. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bartlett. You've got some more questions, I think. I did wonder whether, in relation to the question you asked there, it may be a recommendation that the committee the committee in future might consider one or two of these risks. And I know we have spoken about it in the past, about doing a sort of deep dive into the risk, so that we can get the directorate here and understand a little better the risk mitigation and how that really works in terms of specifically, I think, risks which don't seem to, they were probably in the risk register 4 years ago when we started our processes, and they still exist in the risk register. So that might be a recommendation, I suppose.
Yes, Chair, it fits in with one of our outstanding actions.
Yeah, it does. Yes. So it's always a problem of agendarising, keeping our working papers to something that we can manage. But I think that would be of interest to do.
And I think, Chair, as well, it's always that tension between if something hasn't got an update, has it not got an update because nothing's happened? Or has it not got an update because nobody bothered to update it? So sometimes when it says, yes, we looked at this and there's no reason to change it, it's quite a useful phrase. Am I ready to ask another question?
Feel free.
Feel free. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm looking at page 55, which is the breakdown of the corporate risk register actions. And from CRR 67 down, the actions are, the action owner, risk owner, is down as the Interim Service Director, Environment, Highways and Waste. And they've got several actions against them. And I tried to look up the Interim Service Director, Environment, Highways and Waste, and I have a feeling hasn't our structure of management now overshadowed that? Don't we have people in place with their own areas of expertise? And do we actually have an Interim Service Director, the Environment, Highways and Waste anymore? And if we don't, shouldn't these be reallocated to whoever is in post now? It might be me looking on the internal address book, because I couldn't find who our Interim Service Director was.
Chair, I think the officer in question is Mark Averill. He's an interim. I'm not sure of the exact job title, but I can check for you. But I think that's the individual who's occupying that post at the moment.
Thank you, because I understand, yes, he is certainly in highways, but he's not responsible for waste as far as I can tell.
I would have to check, Chair Trevor.
Yeah. Yes, I think Councillor Bartlett, you raise a question that's quite often in councillors' minds, as a number of posts have had different labels changed over the last 2 or 3 years, and we do get a little bit. Well, I get confused as to who's responsible for what. Thank you for that. Any other questions from committee, or do you want Councillor Bartlett to continue? Councillor Summers.
It's not really a question. It seems to be the green, yellow, and amber, red seem to be constant. And I have to ask, Why? I presume services is everyday staff. Directorate is higher up. Corporate should include both. I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong, but
Sorry, could you just refer to what?
page, oh, that's on page 52.
Page 52.
Just the color of the risk register. You've got green low, yellow medium, amber high, red extreme. Now service is in green and yellow, directorate is in amber, which is a high, and red is extreme. Now corporate, I always figured corporate was an umbrella type thing, but I could be wrong. Directorate, we shouldn't be having concerns there now because there's been a lot of changes. Now we haven't made changes for the better, and there has to be, the questions have to be asked, why is that not improving? I can, our staff looks great, green and yellow, that's a service, I presume is staff, everyday staff. I should say everyday staff, but I could be wrong.
Right, I think what we're talking about is a service risk register, which would be specific to
Everyday.
a branch of, so it might be highways.
Yeah.
As opposed to a directorate risk register, which is environment and waste. And then the corporate risk register, which is across the whole organisation.
Yeah.
But whereas service risk registers, I don't know, highways might score the unavailability of gritters, and unavailability of staff to do gritters, and they may mitigate that by having agency staff, and then so it's a low. So it only ever appears in the service register. We never see it as appearing in the corporate or the directorate register. Whereas I did note one, the unavailability of new gritting machines as shot up through the rankings because if the machines aren't available, then that's a significant risk.
They've been ordered, but that's not. That seems to be low risk in compared to directorate and corporate, and I just wonder what makes it an amber and what makes it a red. It
will be the score after mitigation of the risk.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Happy, I'm right on all of that, am I?
Yes, Chair. So all the risks are part of their individual strategic, the individual directorate risk registers. Anything which meets a score of 9 or above is escalated to directorate risk register. Anything which meets a score of 16 and above are then escalated further for the corporate scrutiny, and that's why they are on the corporate risk register. So the risk with the probability of 16 to 25, which are the high risk items, are always brought to forefront for CLT's attention, hence why they are red.
So I guess my question is, would it not be better to, rather than generalize the service, which service it is, or that is an issue? That's further down, is it?
In the internal risk.
Thank you. I'm just, I'm
that's
been doing this for.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Bartlett, another question.
Yes. No. Page 66. So this is a question on risk EE06. We've got a destination Hereford risk relating to DFT funding, which says if we are unsuccessful in getting further funding, then the vast majority of the project will finish in September 2022. Because we've gone past 2022, I was wondering what the outcome of that was, whether we received the funding and it's no longer a risk to the project ending. We didn't receive the funding and the vast majority of the project finished, or it was possibly funded a different way. It's, to my mind, it looks like it needs to be updated, that risk.
Sorry, Jen, which one was that?
I will follow it up and get back to you.
Thank you. Just speak, sorry.
So, sorry, can I just ask one last question? It's actually at the bottom of that page 66. And it's EE14. And the risk is ecological resource. If the ecology team does not get additional resources, then delivery of statutory role and planning will not be met. Sort of a meeting where there was a question asked about planning. And my understanding from the director was that the ecology team was now up to date, and certainly when I look, there seems to be ecologists in planning. So I'm just wondering again, if that EE14 needs to be updated, if we do actually have an ecology team in place now. We might not have a full team and it might still be relevant, but I had the impression that we had managed to recruit to that team. So an update on that would be useful. Thank you.
I'll follow it up again.
Thank you. Happy, just to confirm that the registers that we've received here are as at the end of December 22. So that's the date of the report that we're
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Just as a thought, you may want to consider, and I hate to put more information on the sheet than's required, but under the reference number, it may be worth considering putting a date at which that risk was last revised by the department or by corporate selection. So I'm presuming that all the corporate risks have been revised at 30th of December. I suspect that some of the service risks and some of the departmental risks may have been visited previous to that, and what we're not necessarily seeing is the absolute picture there as the 30th of December. But without having it's a bit like our action list, without having a date, it's only sort of suspicion that some of these things have been accessed on that or updated to that date. But it's easy for risks for events to outpace the risk, as it were. So, as Councillor Bartlett has pointed out on this, would you like to give consideration to that, and so that we can be more certain of when the department is actually reviewing the risk?
Noted, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Summers. Councillor Summers.
Just quickly, it may have nothing to do with this, but on risk, I noticed on adult social care, recently we've had some issues with the Health and Wellbeing Board, and they've changed direction. Does this go out to the risk registry? If a board is not performing to what expectations for, like for example, the Health and Wellbeing Board, they started off one way, now they're going another direction. Does that come in as a risk at any place? Can we? I don't know how you judge it. It's because I guess it's a personal thing for the board to decide. Is that more to do with it? And when they do decide, is it then reflected as a risk? Because anyway, that's a strange one, I know. But Health and Wellbeing Board, for example, was not doing what they thought it should do, and now it's being done again. Being revamped, and this is about the third time it's been revamped, I think, over the past 7 years. So is that a risk, and should that be registered by the board? I don't know. Anyway, just a thought. Thank you, I have no idea where I'm coming from on this one.
No, that's all right. I think it will be picked up by the directorate. So whether that's adults or children's, probably adults.
Are we willing to agree that we've maybe made a mistake and we're redoing it? That's the question, I suppose. And do we keep going? So anyway, it's one of those things that,
Right, so
going back to children's, we need to make sure that these boards and stuff are doing their job. And if they're not, then I don't.
Yeah.
Just me stirring, I suppose.
It probably is more of a scrutiny
Okay.
area, but I expect if the directorate had a concern, then I'd expect to see the risk
That's why.
in the directorate register. And our sort of interest is really to make sure that we've got a structure to the registers that recognise those risks and pick them up. And I've got one final question, really, that looking at the table in paragraph 8, where we're looking at a breakdown of the current corporate risks by directorate, as well as the number of risks currently being managed at director level. Economy and environment have by far identified by far the larger number of directorate risks, and interestingly, they have the most corporate risks. And it's always been, there's a question really as to whether the level of risk being allocated is perceived as the same across the directorates. So if I'm sitting as a manager in economy and I have I'm concerned about something, am I putting a 20 on it, whereas a colleague in community wellbeing might only be putting a 14 on it? And it's really to understand, I recognise that we are training management in using this system, but the only evidence that I can see before me is that economy and environment might be scoring things a bit higher than the other two directorates. I just wondered if you wanted to take that away and discuss that, because I don't think you'll have an answer for it, but unless it's to assure me that all directorates score exactly the same, but I'd have hesitation in accepting that. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Yeah, thank you. Do I have any more questions? No? Thank you. In which case, do we have any? I've lost track of any actions or.
Yes, in terms of recommendations, you mentioned about in line with Action 99 Committee's risk register, and that action is the committee agreed that it needs to be for consideration of identifying one or more risks in the risk register, and then take a deep dive to provide assurance that the risk management framework was being applied appropriately. So that's already an action in the log, but I guess were you inviting perhaps that to be dealt with in future risk register reports? As some examples are contained within that.
I think what I'd like to see is that activity to be put into come under into the work programme perhaps as one to be identified for the coming year. I think it would be good use of committee's time to understand, certainly a new committee, to then understand how these risk registers are put together, and give them an opportunity to deep dive to one of those.
So I think sorry.
Yes, no, I would agree with that. But I do think there's more around the last conversation we had about the risks themselves, and how they are defined by the individual directorates. So something about it's the process for defining a risk the same across all the directorates? I mean, I know I said that she was going to say it that way, but is that something that we want to put on the action register? That we want to actually understand better the process of how a risk becomes a risk that ends up on the risk register? And if everybody follows the same process, or is it a bit, is it one of the things that are still rather silo working? Particularly given the fact that there is such a discrepancy in the number of risks across the 4 areas, you know, from 10 in children's, which you would have thought would be quite a risky area at the moment, to 43 in economy and environment, whether there is actually a standard process or whether we are actually still silo working a little bit in terms of how we identify and define the risk.
Perhaps we could ask for an explanation of how individual directorates identify and quantify risk, to come forward with the next risk strategy report. So that could invite a comment by each of the directorates on how they identify and score risk, so that we as a committee can see that there's some commonality of approach.
It looks like a flow chart, you know. Everybody uses it.
Okay, so that's helpful. Thank you. I'll include that as an action then. And also, I think you mentioned about consideration in including the latest data review for each risk within the risk registers.
Yes, no, I appreciate that. That may be quite an ask, but I think it would at least illustrate that that those risks have been reviewed. So it provides assurance that the risk has been reviewed and not just left from months to months.
Yeah, and the only thing captured was accurate that head performance invites review entries. I think the EO6 and E14. So I'll reference that in the minutes rather than as a separate action. Just to review.
Are we content with those?
Yeah, probably crazy question. Risks. When it comes to risks, how do we those risks? If it's a group or a committee that's got a risk involved, are we getting back to them, or can they see that before it becomes? I don't know when the risk register comes out, but risks don't happen every 6 months; they happen all the time. So I'm not sure where I'm at with this one again.
So one of the improvements, if I call it an improvement, is that we now see risks come up to the risk register, the corporate risk register, and also drop off.
Okay.
So some risks are transitory, others are sort of continuous, because they exist all the time, and you just have to mitigate according to risk appetite against them. It's usually a very interesting area to get involved with risks. You look at individual risks, and we each have our own understanding of them. What we as a committee need to really agree on is that we've got a process, as Councillor Bogler says, that the organisation can manage the risks. So we don't get too concerned with a specific risk, although from time to time we always do.
Yes, but I would also add that one of the other actions that happens now is that the other committees, so the Adults Committee, as part of their work programme, looking at Ben here, as part of their work programming now, they will see the adults risk register. So when they are programming their work, they will be aware of what risks are in their directorate. So the committee will know.
I appreciate that, but I've been in the adult health and wellbeing committee for quite some time, and those risks quite often stay with the committee because nobody reads the reports after, so, and I know that's a concern right across the board, but should those risks go to where they're talked about beforehand, or should, anyway, it's just something, sometimes those risks are not forwarded to anyone. Yeah.
Well, the whole purpose of having a risk register, as well as our ability to give assurance to the council that we recognise risks, corporate risks most importantly, is that it is an aid for management. Yeah. It's really an aid for management in determining resource and how the risks reflect on the corporate plan.
We need to cut back quickly.
Now, what we can't do is micromanage the performance. Thank you for that. Okay, I think we're all happy with those recommendations and actions on item 8. So I'll move to agenda item 9. Agenda item 9 is the Anti-Fraud, Bribery and Corruption Annual Report. The purpose of this report is to provide a summary overview on all counter-fraud activity across the Council's activities through the previous calendar year, and to outline any progress and outcomes aligned with our anti-fraud strategy. Jonathan Nelson, our counter-fraud manager, will present the report. Our recommendations tabled are as A, the annual fraud report to be reviewed by the committee to provide members with an accurate account of the latest counter-fraud activity across services, and any other recommendations that you want to bring forward. Jonathan, I think you're on the Zoom call.
I think, Chair, I'm just going to introduce the report first and then I'll hand over to Jonathan for some detailed questions. So thank you, Chair. The report highlights the activity over the last 12 months. I think you can see from the increased number of referrals, the activity that we've had to improve our approach and develop some agile ways of working and increase the way that we work with partners. I'd like to congratulate the team who've been shortlisted for the Local Excellence Award at the Public Sector Counter Fraud Awards, which will take place next month in London, in recognition of the work that they've done in the last 12 months. The report acknowledges that we are increasing awareness internally and externally, and we've done that through a refresh of the webpage and additional training this year. And we saw a 75% increase in the referrals during November when we promoted International Fraud Awareness Week. SWAP have also carried out a review of our counter-fraud maturity, and that's included at Appendix A, and that recognises the improvements we've made in the last 12 months, particularly in the culture and awareness and the investigation and reporting work that we've done. I'm happy to hand over then to Jonathan for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, do you have any questions on the report? Yes, Councillor Bartlett.
I do. Thank you for that. And also, I'm looking at page 78 in the pack, paragraph 4.1, the key performance summary, and it's impressive. So well done. But one thing that I'm not 100% sure of. So the key performance, 56% of corporate fraud cases were closed in 2022. And it's my usual type of question. Were they closed with a positive outcome? Were they closed with a negative outcome? It might be that they're related, that's an overarching statistic and the material is further embedded in the report. But for me, I'm not quite sure whether that's 56% is great, we reclaim stuff, 56% is put a lot of effort into and there's no further action. So.
Jonathan, are you able to?
Hi there. Yeah, good afternoon, Chair and Committee. Thanks for your question, Councillor. So I would refer to section 15.1, which I think is on page 83 of the report, which kind of goes through the summary of case outcomes for reference to the cases that we referred to. So as you can see from the closed cases, there are a number of different outcomes that might follow an investigation. So it might be that we don't identify any offence in the fraud, in the allegation itself. So when we talk about referrals, it's an allegation, it's not confirmation of fraud at that particular stage. There might be insufficient evidence to pursue any criminal activity, or it simply might be that we take any number of different sanctions. So in the most serious cases, and it's in the public interest, we might pursue a criminal prosecution, or civil recovery might be a more proportionate action to the type of offence as well, because we have to consider proportionality in any investigation that we undertake. And as you know, it's a huge issue, fraud. So it does require collaborative working, where we work with other law enforcement agencies as well. So we will refer to to other law enforcement agencies if it's more to do with their remit in certain investigations. So hopefully, section 15.1 gives you a bit of an overall view of the outcomes that we're referring to with these cases.
Thank you. Yes, and it does, and I suspected it was probably my just not being able to link that headline to the specific point in the report. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I'd just like to comment on the report itself. I felt it was very well written and very understandable, and with lots of lots of pictures, but lots of graphics which well illustrate the activity that's being undertaken, and that's very much appreciated. In terms of a curiosity that I just wanted to understand, where the council issues a penalty notice, for instance, with blue badges, is it the council that retains the income from those penalty notices, or does that pass to HM Treasury? Do you know? Does anybody know?
Thank you, Chair. I would have to come back to you, because I think it's mainly the parking enforcement team that would be able to answer that question. But if we can have that as an action, I'm sure we can come back to you as to whether that is the case. Yeah,
if it's an all parking enforcement team, I suspect that funding goes to the Treasury rather than to the council. But it's a query that I suspect the public might be interested in knowing the answer to, so that we can understand what we're doing there. And a broader question, which you probably won't be able to answer, but again, a question that the public might be asking, is what is the cost of fraud to Herefordshire Council? What you've illustrated in this report is that through diligent work and investigation, we've stopped an appreciable amount of potential fraud. I don't know whether you have a feeling is there fraud that we're still not discovering, or effectively have we only left the tip of the iceberg that we can't see, and we've covered most of the fraud that the council might be suffering. I don't know whether you get a picture regionally or nationally from some of the bodies that you're members of for that, or can offer a comment, or whether Mr. Lovegrove wants to offer a comment.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. I think first and foremost, it's important that we consider what the national picture is and national geographic of fraud. So I think what we are seeing is an increase of fraud nationally, and from central government talking about this very topic, we know that fraud equates to approximately 40% of all crime that's committed in the UK nationally. What that means is, for public sector local authorities, that can equate as much as 7.8 billion annually. So it's a significant sum of money that we're talking about across local authorities nationally. And in comparison to that, there's a real issue with resourcing to tackle the issue, and that's a systemic thing within the system that needs to be addressed. In that there's only 1% believed law enforcement resources that are allocated to deal with this issue. So there's a disproportionality really of the amount that this offence is being committed, public sector, cross sector against private organisations, and the amount of resources that are allocated to actually and with the skill sets to deal with this, because it's a specialist area that we all know. What we are seeing, it's hard to comment too much on where we are with local figures, because for two reasons. Our counter fraud function really only started when I joined in 2020 at the start of the pandemic, so that we can only really rely on our corporate fraud figures from then. And as you know, from the start of 2020, the primary focus was dealing with business COVID grants because of the increased fraud risk associated with large proportions of money exiting on a huge scale quickly. So a lot of my resource and time at that particular moment was spent on dealing with COVID related fraud. And as we've entered 2022, those investigations have significantly reduced and corporate fraud investigations have increased, as I'm now able to spread out to wider to other service areas. And you can see that the spread in which these referrals that we're receiving is more broad, whereas over 2020 and 2021 it was predominantly grant related. For obvious reasons, that was the highest risk area that needed to be dealt with. So what I can say is that there's two factors to consider here: the visibility and fraud awareness of the team to be able to reach out to services. Resourcing needs to be operationally considered in order to do that and in order to enhance our ability going forward. And secondly is the national geographic in terms of the cost of living crisis. Obviously that creates new opportunities for fraud and the new desire to commit fraud as well. So there is a number of different things and factors to consider, and it's quite a difficult area to comment on, other than to say that a lot of fraud does go undetected. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening. It's to do with obviously your visibility and your resources, and obviously your determination to find it and to react to it in a proportionate manner. So hopefully that touches base on a broad scale, view chair.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah. And I'd also like to compliment you, or compliment the team, the department, on publishing and getting published some of the activity that we're doing in terms of counter fraud. I note on paragraph 13 that we put up publishing successes, and it's very much, I think, part of by publishing the fact that we're active in this area. I'm sure it will help. We hope it will help reduce the likelihood of people thinking that they can carry out activity and get away with what they're carrying out. The swap reported at Appendix A. I mean that's a huge a difference between this year and last, and obviously that reflects the work that's been carried out by yourself. The only key, the one red finding in terms of the embedding of the fraud risk self-assessment that was issued in June 22, not being embedded in the corporate risk management process yet. Obviously, I think we just need to bring that to management's attention, that needs to be done. And once that's done, I think I would say the whole job's done, but it will be pretty much as good as we are going to get in this area. Any other comments, recommendations from committee? No.
Very nicely laid out.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, and we wish you all the best in the upcoming competition. It's a awards recognition.
Here, well done.
Yeah. We hopefully we come away with a gold cup or whatever, which will need to be carefully valued. Right. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Agenda item 10, the work programme. We've got the work programme in front of us. It's also in large type for those like me who have forgotten their glasses. Just to consider the work programme for the committee going forward. A number of items have been rescheduled to the March 2023 meeting, which is it's looking a bit busy at the moment, but we'll review that in due course. The external auditor's annual report, the external audit plan, the progress report, the update on the whistleblowing policy, the annual governance statement progress update, and the annual code of conduct report will all be moved.
How many additional things are we putting on there, Chair?
Well, we are putting
There's quite a few on.
a few on, but I think there's at least I'll work with the clerk and see if there's anything that can be moved and review. I do know last year I think we may have had an extra meeting.
Yes. I'm mindful we're going into elections in May.
We are going to elections in May.
etc.
I don't think any of our reports will fall foul of the election restrictions.
No, it is more business as usual, isn't it?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, you know, we'll if we do need an extra meeting, I guess it depends on the success of the March meeting and getting through items. But if we do need to schedule an extra one, then of course we can do so, and then double check the terms of engagement, as it were, for any subsequent meeting.
So that would be our plan at the moment.
Right.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ish. Yeah.
Ish.
Thank you. In which case,
2 o'clock the next one. Thank you.
in which case I declare the meeting closed, and then we, other than thanking officers, I close the live stream.